Hi, I'm Chip DeGrace, and I work for a company called Interface. I'm here representing that company and myself. Our value system is inextricably linked. I'm excited to be here today to speak with you, and I hope that through my story that I might illustrate the degree to which I'm an optimist and how that's born from my chosen profession as a designer. I wake up every morning believing that we can design a better way and to create a better future through our combined efforts. I'm going to talk to you today about three basic themes. The first one is the importance of being a troublemaker. Challenging the status quo. These days, business as usual isn't even possible, not to mention even dangerous. Better being a badass, knowing the power of your voice, your vote, and your purchase. The second theme is that the company I work for is trying to be a positive force in the world and be profitable, to do well by doing good. We are the example in the adage, if it exists, it must be possible. And the third, a business must exist for more than just profit. That's not lofty philosophy, but today's business school basics. I want to describe a possible how and why for all of us to make a difference. So let's begin by showing you a vehicle I purchased at the end of 2019 with the intention of working on it and bringing it back to life. Now, I'm not a mechanic, but I'm a well-intentioned mechanic. Yeah, they used to make pickups with only 2 doors. I had no idea how much this crusty truck would come to represent my 2020. I bought it without ever seeing it, telling myself and my wife that all that rust simply wrapped a series of systems that if I properly addressed them, would result in a running, rolling, viable grocery hauler. I'll come back to this later. Whatever I, or we, had planned for this year, it was already being upended not long after that truck was dumped into my driveway. As the global community began to learn the rolling severity of the coming pandemic, we began to make major adjustments to our collective existence. And after months of significant global sacrifices, we now face down a number of intertwined crises, from health and the economy to inequality and leadership. COVID-19 has laid bare the severity of the systemic global problems of inequality, social equity, disparities in health and human services, and the stark relationship of the distribution of wealth to our resilience. Telling these challenges have been met heroically around the globe, less by government institution and more by individuals in affinity communities. Disappointment in our financial, social, and economic systems to support a more equitable, resilient society should be a call to action for well-intentioned troublemakers and designers alike. Unfortunately, as we design our way through this pandemic, the planet's not going to wait. The science community has concurrently been warning about the risk of a viral pandemic and the risk of climate change for far too long. It's been made clear to anyone that will listen that exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial global temperature levels will result in a tipping point that we may not be able to reverse. At our current rate of global greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to miss that target and head towards a 3 to 4 degrees Celsius increase in average temp. A future that isn't livable, but it is still avoidable. The last 6 months has given us a unique view of a range of radical economic and social strategies and the data on their impacts. This April, car traffic was half of what it was in 2019, as you can imagine, and for months, air traffic virtually came to a halt. While greenhouse gas emissions are projected to be 8% lower in 2020 than 2019, the cost has been tremendous. To get there, close to 1 million people have died globally. Tens of millions are out of work. Truth is, to hit carbon targets, we need to do those sort of reductions year over year from now on, but it can't be this way. According to a new report by the World Economic Forum, it cost the U.S. about $5.7 trillion to transition to renewable energy in 15 years, which is about what we've committed to COVID relief in the past 3 months. Bill Gates has commented, "What's remarkable is not how much emissions will go down because of the pandemic, but how little." So despite all the sacrifice, we are still going to emit 92% as much carbon as we did last year. That 8% is neither good nor bad. It's incredible data based on painful experience. It's the kind of stark reality that we can change the way we think and act. We need to design strategies for recovery on the other side of COVID-19. Why would we not make them beneficial to all living things? The company I work for has been redesigning itself with this in mind for 25 years. It's fundamentally changed my worldview and given me the confidence that we as individuals and families and communities and businesses can methodically affect change. The company I went to work for 30 years ago was Interface, and the founder was a guy named Ray Anderson. He was a dreamer, an engineer, an industrialist, and a troublemaker. He was looking forward to changing the world of floor covering. Ambitious, competitive, and quite honestly, he was a badass. In the 1970s, when threatened by his sizable former employer with erroneous legal action to keep him from starting his own company, he not so politely rebuffed them. He hired people with a startup mentality that came to work to be the first to create a process, a machine, or a product. He created a culture that said yes, and then figured out how to make it happen. I mean, I remember running this custom sample studio, having been unsuccessful several times in getting a sample right for a big job. He asked pointedly, next one's gonna be the right one. Not wanting to disappoint him, I went in the back and used a red felt tip marker to place dots where they needed to be. And we got the order, and then somehow matched it in production. He had a strength of conviction and knew when he was onto something. Interface was successful beyond expectations. We changed the carpet world from round to square globally in a scant 20 years. No one even knew what a carpet tile was, no less that they couldn't build an office without some. By any standards, he was an enigma, a conservative Southern gentleman who came to be the greenest CEO. And in the mid-90s, when a single customer asked what the company was doing for the environment, he was inspired to reimagine the relationship between humanity and nature with Interface as the model. No longer were there human systems and ecosystems. They were one system, and he understood the laws of physics and biology prevailed. He reset his company's purpose to be the first industrial company to have no negative impact on the earth, and further to have be a force for positive. Interestingly, 2020 was the target year for that milestone. We had no way to fill that order, but the answer was yes. With Mission Zero, Ray engaged some of the brightest minds on natural capitalism and sustainability and gathered data on how inefficient and wasteful we were. It didn't take him long to conclude that his and most industrial enterprises was ignorant to their impacts on people and planet and were the single biggest cause of ecosystem degradation. It also didn't take him long to understand how much profit existed in doing it the right way. Getting to zero required that we develop a series of measurements around a series of fronts, measurable dimensions like water usage, renewable energy, non-renewable waste, etc. We called it ecometrics, and we measured and designed solutions for annual reductions around the globe. These are hard-fought numbers in a global industrial company. They reflect commitment and continual redesign by our some 4,000 associates. It also reflects an incredible amount of work by our traditional supply chain partners who manufacture and remanufacture things like nylon. It also represents work by customers to retrieve their used flooring, to send it back for recycle, and communities local to our factories to sell us methane from landfill. We have changed our partners and they have changed us, and we've all become an ecosystem. This slide is important because it explains a categorical view of our process towards zero impact approach and beyond. You need a plan. And as we redesigned ourselves, our business and our relationships, it became clearer how to create not only a sustainable enterprise, but a possibly restorative one that gave back. It focuses on the factories where we make stuff, how we make stuff, the materials with which we make stuff, and finally the supply chain ecosystem. At the far left are the aspirational targets like what would a factory look like that actually had positive impacts like a forest? Dispersed materials is a material like ghost fishing nets, polluting small fishing villages in the Philippines, made out of the same high-performance nylon we made our carpet from. It's being locally harvested, sent to our fiber supplier as raw material. Definite troublemaking material. One indicator of business health and viability for publicly traded companies are earnings per share metrics. And through the years, 2009 through 2014, though we hadn't lost momentum in our mission to achieve zero footprint, we did lose Ray. He died of cancer in 2011, and although we knew what to do, we were unclear why. In 2015, we identified a greater aspiration, which was the natural evolution of where we'd already been. As we complete our 2020 milestone, our numbers are these. We have come so far and achieved beyond our wildest expectations. At the same time, we continue to be profitable, growing beyond the industry and earning the right to pursue our mission. The broad constituency that we were working for and with in this natural model were defined as stakeholders. In this longer-term view of our business, traditional short-term beneficiaries like investors, they share the business attention with long-term beneficiaries like the environment. That same constituency was now demanding that we go further. Being less bad wasn't near good enough. The author Paul Hawken has stated the opportunity with a tone of optimism, which is hard for him. He knows too much about the condition of the world. But he has said, you can either look at climate change as if it's happening to you or for you. And at Interface, we prefer to look at it as our biggest design opportunity. Paul has compiled a book about troublemakers all around the globe, drawing down carbon everywhere with no resources, individuals and communities. And one of the biggest opportunities for drawing down carbon, believe it or not, is educating girls in Africa. We began to realize that we had changed the climate by accident, and now was our time to change it with intention. If you're talking about affecting global warming, the first place you have to start is science. It has to be science-driven. So what's the scientific pathway to design the plan? This is the clearest graphic we could find from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and I know it's complicated. But one, it says we need to aggressively reduce carbon emissions, reducing carbon footprint in about 10 years. There's an excess of carbon in the atmosphere, and we need to capture it and use it in business pathways. For us, in the building sector, we're responsible for about 40% of global carbon emissions. We need to get after it because we're the big part of the problem. And the third one is do all of that while protecting and enhancing natural carbon sinks that exist, like forests and oceans. So we needed to develop a business system around these critical themes. So our plan became, number one, to radically decarbonize the business, which we'd already been doing for 25 years, taking out about 96% through raw materials and process efficiency, use of renewable energy, and helping suppliers to do the same. It's been an easy sell. Number two, challenge how we can use carbon as a raw material as a company that makes stuff. Use it as a raw material. Be provocative by design. Try to get permission to create some trouble for our designers and engineers. And number three, run the business to protect natural sinks. Companies use offsets for things like business travel. Pay for projects that reduce carbon elsewhere and choose nature-based. Our aspiration is to reverse climate change. It's our new mission. We call it Climate Takeback. And there's 4 principles. 1, live zero, which is the path that we have been on and the path we'd love for you to be on. Number 2, love carbon. It's in the atmosphere, but it's not the enemy. Let's use it as a design resource. Number 3, let nature cool. Do business in a way that doesn't inhibit nature's ability to do what she already does well. And number 4, lead the industrial re-revolution. This is where you guys come in. Transform industry as a force for the future we want. So let's all influence each other for the positive. So carbon is a building block for life in many forms, as it turns out, a possible raw material for us to redesign our products. Carbon captured after industrial processes, or capturing fugitive carbon and combining it with stable solids. And we should continue to recycle the new carbon sequestering raw materials. There are radical developments both in the natural photosynthetic conversion of carbon into bio-derived carbon storing materials and synthetic conversion into carbon storing materials and polymers. We are jazzed about the new material sectors being created and the positive impacts of carbon negativity that they have. We're working to develop ways to use plant materials, recycled carpet, and waste materials to move interface towards negative material and product. After launching Climate Takeback in 2016, we asked the impossible of our global product and innovation people and told them in 1 year's time, we wanted a prototypical carpet tile that would be carbon negative in its manufacture. That is, it would be better for the earth that it was made than if it weren't. They did it by taking specific plant-derived carbon and converting it to a durable material that sequesters carbon. And what was cool was we proved it to ourselves, but it also challenged the industry. And if a chucklehead flooring company can do this, then why not more sophisticated manufacturers of building products, or architects of buildings, or building systems, or cities? It had a ripple effect, and it's begun to change the standards such that there now are certifications and awards given to carbon negative products based on our little tile exercise. If you're in the climate reversal business, time is of the essence. Whether software, furniture, or flooring, you need to start innovating in your medium. In 2 short years, we prototyped, then commercialized a backing system for commercial production. 1 year later, we created 2 new backing systems that are carbon negative, utilizing combinations of biopolymers and recycled synthetics at scale. And in the 5th year of a pandemic, we're introducing a flooring product that's carbon negative. A finished carpet tile is a fairly complicated sandwich of layers of materiality for rigidity, structure, pliability, and comfort. And to get the appropriate chemistry, both natural and synthetic, to combine for the benefit of the planet by sequestering carbon is a good day's work on the part of our designers. Architecture 2030 is a not-for-profit created for the purpose of transforming the building and construction industry from one of the biggest contributors of carbon emissions to a force for good. And they've stated that by 2060, we're going to double the current worldwide building stock. We're going to build another planet. And about 40% of that will happen in the next 15 years. Now, there are 2 types of carbon that contribute to the building sector being responsible for 43% of global greenhouse gas emissions: operational and embodied. Operational is the carbon load created by the use of energy to heat and power a building, and embodied carbon, which is the carbon that is released in the manufacturing, production, transportation of the building materials. As an industry, design and engineering efforts for the last 40 years has been on improving building efficiency and reducing operational carbon footprints. If a building has a lifespan of 80 years, the greatest opportunity for reduction is in the amount and the type of energy a building uses. But if we have 2 years to peak emissions and 10 years to make significant reductions, the opportunity lies in the embodied carbon, the stuff that makes up the building. So between now and 2035, embodied carbon will be more than 50% of the carbon contributor of the building industry. And it hasn't even been on the industry's radar. So what stuff is made of? Last year, one of my associates noticed in Gensler's 2017 annual Impact by Design that one of the firm's global goals was to measurably reduce the impact of CO2 for products at its specs. So my associate, a troublemaker, called their CEO, and together they birthed something called Materials Can, which is a group of companies just putting their effort to raising awareness of the opportunity for designing with embodied carbon in mind. With urgency as a subtext and speed and scale as drivers, we invited some of the biggest global participants to begin and to continue to join. To be very clear, the full life cycle analysis of products and materials includes the dimensions included here. The carbon implications of all these activities are captured currently in something called an EPD, which is kind of a report card on products. They are extremely difficult to understand. Most designers cannot get through them. But they're the best comparable and transparent reporting of a product's carbon footprint. Unfortunately, that information is on page 13 of a 27-page report. So most specifiers can't and won't suffer the difficulty of accessing it. To show how important accounting of carbon footprint is this small case study. Kirsten Ritchie, who's the principal and director of sustainable design at Gensler, had her team put this together. On the left, they put together their go-to specs that they thought were pretty good. And on the right-hand side, they actually looked at the carbon footprint of the products they were putting in. They chose products that had lower carbon footprint with a savings of 43% carbon reduction. That's just paying attention. So you can see on this very small scale the difference this can make. So that last case study was done longhand. Gensler had their designers dig in and find EPDs to prove that case. But here's where it gets interesting. Skanska, working with Microsoft on their sizable multi-building project up in Seattle, Microsoft was desirous of intentional embodied carbon accounting. And when the shortcomings of existing tools were explained to them, Microsoft said, screw this, let's just design our own tool in conjunction with Skanska and the University of Washington and others. It's currently being used on their project and has actually been launched online. It focused mostly on core and shell because that's where those projects were, but the interior fit-out materials like wallboard, ceilings, flooring are in the tool today. It is an open source, non-subscription, web-based opportunity for everybody. So if you're a specifying designer, engineer, you can actually access this and look at the carbon footprint of comparative products. So at the specification stage or at the schematic design stage, you can actually look at the carbon footprint in metrics and decide whether or not you want to choose something that has lower carbon footprint or higher carbon footprint and what the range of that looks like. You'll also be able to denote geography and product category and other refining criteria. The tool harmonizes and delivers a range of specifications with corresponding LCA information. So what it does is it actually goes out online and grabs all the EPDs and it offers them up to you by category such that you can make an intelligent decision. And we have found out, for the most part, that it is the cost differential between doing it the right way and doing it the old way is not significant. Coming out of this pandemic and acknowledging the speed with which the climate is changing, the contribution to this problem or the solution is measurable and significant. Carbon should be top of mind. By the way, sorry there's no furniture in this slide for all you furniture folks. But if a flooring manufacturer like us can change itself and its products and its supply chain for the benefit of the globe and at the same time be profitable, why can't we influence other flooring manufacturers to do the same? We have. And that's influenced the people that make sheetrock and ceilings and furniture and then concrete and steel. We can then change our industry in the global building sector. It's happening. It needs to happen faster. Come on, this is troublemaking at its best and making a difference at the same time. Now let's hear a direct challenge to all of us from Ray.
Reinventing civilization is a tall order. So is starting the second industrial revolution. Paul Hawkins says only business and industry are strong enough to lead. We agree. Why not us? Why not you and us? It's the greatest play-to-win game of all time. Thank you.
For additional information, I'd recommend these two books. The first one is Paul Hawkins' Drawdown. I referenced it earlier. It's a real-life accounting of large and small things being done by people and organizations around the globe that are drawing down carbon. The second is Bruce King's The New Carbon Architecture, which puts this topic squarely in today's context. In the first couple of pages, he recounts driving behind a Tesla with the license plate, no carb. He states the problem at hand, that no one is actually thinking about the carbon emitted in making the stuff. In celebration of our achievement of our Mission Zero goals, we documented some of the lessons we've learned, and that can be downloaded at interfaceinc.com. And they can be used to make some trouble, or profit, and certainly a difference. So back to my old pickup truck. Well, it seems that when you're way over your head and in need of design help and inspiration, you can rely on your community. And if it's help with a rusty pickup or designing with carbon, there are kindred spirits closer than you might think. If the last 4 months has taught us anything, it's that there's tremendous capacity for generosity, encouragement, and innovation right at the end of our driveways. Thanks for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon.